This is a text which bears a relationship to a forthcoming book with Routledge entitled Religion and Nation in Eastern Europe, Russia, and the Post-Soviet West. The subtitle will eventually read From the Middle Ages to Today, although it currently has the wrong subtitle. And the article, it's based more specifically on an article that I wrote on commission for two people based in Hungary, I think one in Budapest and one in Debrecen, if I have that straight in my head. And what I've done with this, it's not identical with what's in the book. There's a certain overlap, but it's written on its own. It's not just copied and pasted over, and has its own internal validity. In this piece, I look at 4 questions. And the first is, when did the sense of national belonging arise? When did people say, we have a nation, this is our nation, or people? Nation and people, as you know, certainly in some languages, there's one word to cover both, or folk in German, Narod in Serbian, perhaps in Romanian, it's a similar. But, it's one of the things about those two languages. In German, for people, there's folk, which is like the nation. There's also Leute, which means like people on a bus. Wie viele Leute gibt es auf diesem Bus? How many people are on the bus? And in Serbo-Croatian, Serbian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, they have a distinction between narod and ljudi, same thing. So I want to know, the first question is, when did the sense of national belonging arise, and what drove it? Secondly is, when did the sense of national belonging in Eastern Europe arise? Did it arise at more or less the same time? If not, why not? In fact, it didn't arise at the same time, but we'll get into that. The third is, what role did Christian religion play in driving a sense of religio-national community? And finally, if we have time, how did the Protestant Reformation impact the sense of national belonging in religiously divided societies such as Czechia or Czech Republic, as I prefer, Hungary and Slovakia, and of course Ukraine is also religiously divided, but that lies a bit to the outside of my concern. Well, I can only see a couple of you here, but for those whom I can see, if I don't know how to stop these interruptions. If you have read Benedict Anderson's Imagined Societies, raise your hand. Okay, 2 of you. If you've read Ernest Gellner's Nations and Nationalism, again the hand. If you've read Eric Hobsbawm's book, raise your hand. I'm going to put it halfway up. I think I've read some parts. I've certainly read, I know what's in it. So these first 2 by Anderson and Gellner were published in 1983, and they shook up the academic community. They're well-written books by a couple of British-based scholars. I remember attending a conference at a certain university some years ago, and somebody mentioned Ernest Gellner's book. I hadn't heard of it, and this was, oh, no, you've got to read this book, it's very important. And so I went to the university bookstore right there at the break and found it and bought it. But the thing about these 2 books is that they both claim that the sense of nation arose only in the late 18th century. Symbolically, one could say in association with the French Revolution, although that's not actually what they, certainly it's not what Anderson says is the driving force. Anderson said that the driving force was the invention of movable type and the development of dictionaries. And that before that, people didn't have a sense of nationality. And I paid careful, I went back to reread. I originally read the first edition, and now for this, I got the second edition, read relevant parts, not everything. I'd already read the whole book. And I wanted to see if when he claimed that nation arose only at the end of the 18th century, if he meant chauvinism or if he meant more generally. In fact, he's very careful. He said nationality, nationness, and nationalism all emerged only at the end of the 18th century. Gellner's position, when I went back to look at it, actually struck me as bizarre. Now, Gellner was certainly, I think he's passed, was or is a genius. There's no question about that. He wrote a book that's in elegant prose, no question about that. But he made the claim, and I'll read the exact quotation from him: it's nationalism which engenders nations, not the other way around, which means that the whole nation is a kind of construct by intellectuals or politicians for their own purposes. And although Anderson used the word imagined communities, this word imagined is actually misleading, because he doesn't actually think, oh, let me think, oh, what can I imagine? Ooh, I could imagine people as a nation. No, that's not at all the point. But it seems to reflect rather, on the other hand, what Gellner said. Their two books came out in 1983. Anthony D. Smith must have read these rather quickly, because he brought out a counter argument just 3 years later. And given how extended his book is, how impressive it is, I think he must have jumped on it right away. Hobsbawm's book came out in 1991. Adrian Hastings' book followed in 97. And then this book by Patrick Geary, finally. For those of you who are interested in book covers, Adrian Hastings has the best book cover. He's always on my mind. Sometimes I can't remember book covers better than I remember authors and titles. It was a blue book. Okay, so what did Adrian D. Smith say together with these other two scholars I just mentioned? Their argument is that there was a collective sense of self, which could be called nation, going back at least to medieval times. Geary just focuses on medieval. Anthony D. Smith and Adrian Hastings, however, carried back farther back into medieval times. And there have been a few people. Now, these I've seen articles online. One of the journals that I'd like to look at occasionally is it's a journal devoted to ancient Roman history. That's what it is. Since I sent around my text, you could look there and you find the exact name of the journal. And there I found an article by William Rollo. There's also available articles by Robin Lane Fox, David Gribble, Bruce Routledge. Bruce Routledge was just online, but I think Engelbert Papers, I think that's where he published it. And what they talk about, as does Anthony D. Smith, is a sense of nation, a collective sense that we are a people, we have something in common, we're different from others. That goes back to ancient times. If you've read about all of you will know something about the ancient Greeks, and you know they said, we're Greeks, everybody else barbarians. Well, the everybody else barbarians tells you already that they thought that they were a nation, in some sense of nation, a people, a folk, a narod. Not just Leute, not just people on a bus. The Jews, chosen people. You know, again, this is, and this goes back to ancient times. That's clearly the same thing. Ancient Rome, also there was a sense of what it was to be Roman. Although I think that this was certainly somewhat different in character from the ancient Greeks and the ancient Jews, but nonetheless, still broadly speaking, a sense of nation. I believe in Adrian Hastings' book that he mentioned the only person ever that I've encountered called the Venerable Bede of Jarrow. This was an English monk who lived from 673 to 735, and he wrote a book which became available or was finished in 731. Remember, no movable type at that time. 731, and the book is entitled The history of the English church and people. Ah, people, English people. Okay, well, that's a clue. So he had certainly a sense that there was an English, I'm going to say, nation. In Eastern Europe, East Central Europe, I use these terms interchangeably because Peter Sugar and Don Treadgold had a series called History of East Central Europe, which included Balkan places. So it's a legitimate use of that term. There was a tract written, thought to date from 1117 to 18, 12th century, called the Gesta Principum Polonarum, the Deeds and Princes of the Poles, a Polish nation. Then there was, coming out in 1125, Cosme Pogensis Chronica Bohemorum, Cosma of Prague, that's the author, then the Chronicle of the Bohemians. And this also tells one that this notion of Bohemia is not simply a name that was brought in by the Austrians. It had an earlier history. And the fact that this had a sense of nation is revealed in the fact that Cosma devoted some time to making very negative comments about Jews, Germans, and Poles. Yeah, we Bohemians are better than those German, Jews, and Poles. We are a nation. We are splendid. So again, this sense of nation going back to the 12th century. Now, it's not important to say that everybody had that sense of nation. The point is that it was developing, it was coming, and there was certainly writers and people who had this sense of nation. And it tended to be religious people too, meaning clergy, for example. Then there was an anonymous scribe, an anonymous writer writing, completing a chronicle in 1230 for the Hungarians. It was called Gesta Hungarorum, the deeds of the Hungarians. And then somebody called Simon of Keda put together Gesta Hunorum et Hungarorum, the deeds of the Huns and Hungarians. And this came out subsequently. All of these chronicles were written after Christianization. Now, where are these places? Oh, yeah, they're in the northern tier. Poles, Bohemians, Hungarians, not Balkans. Although, I freely admit that in my glorious and luminescent omniscience, I don't actually know everything. So maybe there are things in the Balkans that preceded what I know about. But the earliest that I know of for an actual declaration, we can call it of nationhood, came with Father Paisi of Hilandar, who wrote a Slavic Bulgarian history. Slavic Bulgarian, why do we need Slavic in there? Bulgarian to Slav. This is what he called it. I'm innocent. And it includes this claim of the entire Slavic nation. See, Slavic nation, Russians, Ukrainians, Croats, Slovene, everybody one nation, not Romanians, of course. The Bulgarians have been the most famous. They were the first to have tsars. They were the first to have patriarchs. They were the first to be converted. They conquered more land than anybody. Always conquering. There are battles, always battles. Battles always there. Battles, fighting, battles. All right. That came later. In the meantime, in 1415, back in Prague, and there was a fellow called Jan Hus, who was a priest, a preacher, and he had some ideas. He seemed to be agreeing with John Wycliffe, based in Britain, that this notion of transubstantiation didn't make any sense to him. And I don't know if you all know what this is, and I don't know if the Orthodox have it, but I was raised Catholic. I know the most about the Catholics. I know some things about Orthodox and Protestants, and beyond that, I have some clues. I read about Shinto. Wow, fantastic religion, my favorite religion. But Jan Hus said that when the priest says, "This is my body, this is my blood." It's kind of a declaration. Has no transformative dimension or significance. The Catholic Church taught then and teaches now that when the priest says that, in some sense, the bread that the priest raises up becomes the body of Christ, and that when he raises up the child, says, "This is my blood," in some sense, it becomes blood, even though the church has never made the claim that, well, at least not since people know about chemistry, that the chemistry changes, and certainly the taste doesn't change. So that much is clear enough. The church was very, very upset about this. And that was perhaps the main thing, but he had some other ideas that the church didn't like. And so he was asked to recant. He didn't want to recant, so he was burned at the stake. He had some people, he had admirers. He was obviously a very effective preacher, preaching at the Bethlehem Chapel. And they organized, they called themselves Hussites after him, Husity perhaps in Czech. And then they mobilized an army under the command of Jan Žižka. And this army held out against Catholic armies. And one of the things, it's not in here, but one of the things about this Hussite army, which is also called Taborites, is that when they would go into battle, they would sing hymns. Now, imagine you're a mercenary. You're being paid to go out and fight. And you get Sundays off because, as a mercenary, so you're not going to fight on Sundays and holidays. And you go out, and all of a sudden, you're facing an army singing a religious song. Chances are you might be scared. These Catholic armies were just, when I say Catholic armies, these were people working on for pay, and they were run by the Catholic princes, to use the word broadly, but they were not really fighting for religion. They were fighting because they were told to fight, and the Hussites were fighting for their beliefs. The Hussites or Taborites were winning battle after battle after battle, and finally got smashed when three armies came together against them. And this I consider the birth by fire, baptism by fire of the Czech nation. So I got a sense now when sense of nation arose, it arose in a few places in the ancient world, and then later in the medieval age, it spread. It was first in Western Europe, and then in Eastern Europe, and of course, as you all know, there were at certain points a sense of unity between Austrians and Germans in the 19th century. Thought they were one people. You can't find any Austrians now say they're Germans. This is a new sense of nationality. Same with Macedonians and Bulgarians. In the 19th century, it was like one people. But if you call a Macedonian or Bulgarian now, you'd be lucky if you just get insulted and called stupid, maybe. All right. What role did Christian religion play in driving a sense of religio national community? Here we can look at three suppressed nations. By suppressed, I mean ruled by as part of kingdoms of another nation, another language group, if you prefer, because this is vector, sense of nationhood, language, and religion, and these things are interactive. The Serbs, the Poles, and the Czechs, all ruled by other parts of certain larger empires. The Serbs were ruled by the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Empire, most of the 19th century. Gained full independence only in 1878. Czechs and Poles were in the case of the Czechs, part of the Austrian Empire later well, Habsburg Empire, let's put it that way. And then the Poles were divided among three groups in the course of 1772, 1793, and 1795. Russia, Orthodox, Prussia, Protestant, and Austria, Catholic, gobbled up. And of course, the Tsars of Russia thought it'd be nice if they were Orthodox. That's putting it sweetly. They closed up churches. A lot of Catholic churches seized them, gave them to the Orthodox. And Bismarck was hell bent on ideally turning Poles into Prussians. And I didn't say into Germans, I said into Prussians. In other words, he wanted them to have a connection with the Prussian state, to feel that Prussia was somehow their country. And he thought the best way to do that was to wear down their Polish language. So in 1873, by that point, German, no longer Prussia, it was good. German unification in 1871, banned the use of Polish instruction. That was not, let's say, fully effective. And there were also pressures for getting control of episcopal appointments, and then, in fact, Bismarck ended up promoting a colonization of territories annexed from Poland, encouraging German-speaking Protestants to move there. You might know that when the German Empire was stitched together, it didn't become a monolithic whole. There was still various. There was the king of Bavaria was still king of Bavaria, even though it was associated with the German Empire, and there were dukes and princes. Although it was in some ways a kind of reincarnation of the Holy Roman Empire with internal fragmentation, but not for foreign policy, of course. Russian rule was pretty harsh. A lot of Poles went to the United States during this period. They may have gone elsewhere, but the United States, they went in certain numbers. And the final confiscation of Catholic Church lands took place during the reign of Nicholas I, whose reign ended in 1855. One of the striking documents, and I remember reading about this in a brilliant book by Larry Wolf probably pronounces it. I have this old rule: all names are German till proven otherwise. But he's a brilliant scholar. He wrote a wonderful book, and he mentioned his encyclical. I went back and looked up the encyclical and read it. It was issued by Pope Gregory the 16th in 1832, right after the Poles rose up for the first time against Russian rule. And he said, "God has appointed certain rulers over you. The Tsar appointed by God, the German Emperor appointed by God." What is appointed business? Where did the ceremony take place? Did God send an angel down to arrange this? It was obviously an instruction, let's say. And he, the Pope, wanted to have good relations with these rulers, and that's what it was about, maintaining good relations. But some Catholic clergy didn't fancy this idea, and so there was a second insurrection by Poles against Russian rule, and in the second one, which started in 1863. About 15% of Catholic clergy actually joined the rebels, joined the insurgents. Now you'd say 50. What about the other 85%? The other 85% didn't get involved. They didn't want trouble. But these 15% were outspoken. Some of them were commanding and organizing military campaigns. They also serving as chaplains, and this really won the hearts of a lot of Poles. And it helped to meld together the sense of Polish nation, Polish nationhood, and Catholic religion, and specifically Roman Catholic. You may know that there are 8 different rites of the Catholic Church, so Roman Catholic is only one of them. For Czechs, the Hussites came to be seen possibly as forerunners of the 16th century Protestant reformers. That was one interpretation. The 19th century Czech intellectuals also start to reinterpret this in national terms. I mean, this is the Hussite-Taborite war was about religion. It wasn't about nation. But in the 19th century, nation, yes, Czech nation defending itself. In Serbia, the Battle of Kosovo has loomed large in mythology, but its meaning has evolved. And there's a historian called Miodrag Popovic, and he said that he wrote that at the time, because the Ottomans allowed the Serbs to keep their Orthodox Church, the Franciscans were also allowed to into Bosnia when the Ottomans took it. They were more or less reconciled to it. Religion would matter a lot, and having their land and not being taxed to death, and so they were more or less okay, according to Miodrag Popovic. And there's a story, and there's a Norwegian version of this too. This is, I guess, not unique to Serbia. That the night before the battle, Lazar Rebelianovic, prince leading a multi-ethnic, multinational Christian force, had a dream, and he was told it was his choice. He could have a victory in battle and win an earthly kingdom, or he could go down as a martyr and win a heavenly kingdom. So, let me think. Heavenly sounds better. I think I'll take the heavenly kingdom. Okay, according to the legend. I actually gave a lecture in Belgrade once, and I asked, how many of you think Lazar chose to be martyred? No, forget that. No, we don't believe that. But that's the legend, and I'm 100% certain this is still taught in the schools, that any Serbian child will know this, and most of the adults as well, I think. What was his heavenly kingdom? It was a security for the Serbian Orthodox Church that the Serbs were able to keep it. So it was that's what they got out of it. Then you had Milan Nedic. Nedic was an Axis Quisling. But up here in Norway, I had Quisling, and so I sometimes like to say that Quisling was the Norwegian Nedic. But Nedic was outright Nazi. I've read his speeches, a couple of volumes of his speeches. I've read these, and it's this going back to old traditions, the peasants as the heart of the nation, and Nedic and his people recast the Battle of Kosovo and gave it in this tragic sense. This is a great tragedy for our nation. We lost our independence, etc. And what kind of independence was it? Well, that Serbs were ruled by a Serbian king instead of by an Ottoman sultan. Okay, I think we can have some time to say a few things about the Protestant Reformation and national belonging. In 1567, the Reformed, which is to say Calvinist, Church established itself in Debrecen, a city in Hungary. And this came to be called the Calvinist Rome. When I went back in preparing this to look at the statistics for membership, I was actually surprised at how few Lutherans there are in Hungary. I thought that there were more. But the 3 largest bodies in Hungary, the Roman Catholic Church, 37.2%, the Reformed or Calvinist Church, 11.6%, the Lutheran Church, 2.2%, and then the Eastern Rite Catholic Church 1.8%. And a lot of this leaves obviously a large number of people who are not religiously associated. There would be a few Jews there, maybe a few Buddhists, but and perhaps some very small numbers of other groups like Methodists and Mormons, and I don't think the Baha'i. I haven't read the Baha'i up in Hungary. I know that they were proselytizing in Albania, and according to what I had read, made some converts there. But in essence, if the Lutherans might like to say they're a church for the Hungarian nation, but with 2.2%, that's too big a claim. But the Catholics and the Catholic Church and the Reformed Church both claim to be, in some sense, the national church. And then you might say, yeah, but the Reformed Church is only 11.6%. Yeah, but it's still tangible. It's still there. And the center in Debrecen has its own, let's say, glory. In Ukraine, there have been, I actually counted up at one point, this is no longer the case, but back in the 90s, there was a certain period of time when there were 4 Orthodox churches, all Orthodox, all in the sense of that word, proper sense of that word, operating in Ukraine under different rival patriarchs. As of today, there are still 3. One of them run by Filaret, actually united with the main Ukrainian church, but then went split off again later. Let's say that Filaret is a man of vast imagination, and that I'm not insulting him or mocking him. I think imagination is a great thing, although one has to be careful about what one imagines, of course. What happens when what happens when there are rival churches? And I then had a theory. Okay, I bet this will affect how people think about the connection between religion and nation. That was a theory. So then hypothesis. There was a hypothesis. So I went to the Pew Research Center to see what I found there, and they had information about 36 countries. Not all the countries in which I was interested, but they did have information about Poland and Hungary. And what I found here, which is, it sort of validates my hypothesis, which is in Poland, where there are more Catholics than believers. It's our church. We are Catholics. It's our church. We'll be Catholic forever, even if we don't think there's a God. And there are our people take precisely that point of view. They love their church. They identify with it. And I hope you will permit me to make a comparison, which it's not intended to be insulting at all. It's intended to just give a sense of what goes on with people. A team in New York, Knicks, I'm not 100% sure what sport they play. It might be basketball. It might be some other sport. They just won. And then there were masses of people on the streets cheering and shouting, jumping on cars, setting buses on fire, all kinds of celebration. Our people won. Our people. Nationalwood. Our people. And this is it. Our people can be with sports, our people can be with religion, but it's this collective sense we are something. We are a people. We're together, and we're concerned about winning. And how does one win in religion? Well, converts or being good. I mean, to my mind, one of my aspirations in life is at the end of my life, I could look back and say I've done more good than evil. That is perhaps the best criterion for success in life. Do more good than evil. And try not to make too many mistakes. Unfortunately, I keep making mistakes. I try not to make the same mistake twice. That's another rule I have. Just go on to a new mistake, not the same mistake twice. Okay, and anyway, what I found is 60% of polls say that religion is an important component of national identity. So the majority. Then I looked at Hungary, divided. 44% of Hungarians said that it's an important component, religion important component of national identity, which is to say a minority. So that it's precisely it, that when there's only one religion that is really seen as the religion of the people, then that's it. Okay, just to sum up, tried to establish the following things. First, that the sense of being a nation can be traced back to ancient times, and that Benedict Anderson and what's his name, Annis Gellner and Eric J. Hobsbawm wrote brilliant but ultimately misleading books. And that Anthony D. Smith and Patrick Geary and most beloved Adrian Hastings gave a clearer vision by knowing their history. They know their history. To generalize about history without knowing history is, let's say, a problem. The first group, Benedict Anderson and his like-minded colleagues have been called modernists, because they say nationhood is modern, and the other group, Anthony D. Smith and his like-minded colleagues, called perennialists. And they established that the perennialists established, I dare say, that not only Jews, Greeks, and Romans, but I would say also Celts, sometimes pronounced Celts, also had this sense of a nation. Second, I've argued that Christianity contributed to the development of national consciousness across Eastern Europe. I cited tracts linked up with religious figures from the 12th and 13th centuries, celebrating the Poles, Czechs, and Hungarians as nations, talking about their great deeds, the great deeds of the people. The national awakening of the awakening of national consciousness among Serbs, Czechs, and Hungarians came in response to changes, and I actually skipped over a little bit on the Hungarians. The communications within this multinational Habsburg Empire at official level was being done between officers of the government. It was being done in Latin, and then along came Joseph II, who was a modernizer. He was he's considered to have been a liberal monarch, enlightened monarch is actually the usual term. And he said, this makes no sense. Latin, this is a church language. It's a more ancient language. People don't speak it in real life. Let's just have German. And then the Hungarians said, what? German? We were okay with Latin, but German is not our language. We don't want that. And then, of course, you had František Palacký, who gave an address, I think it was 1848, where he got up and defended the Czech language. What language do you think he used to defend the Czech language? German. I find many things in life amusing, so it keeps me going. And then I mentioned how there's this suppression of Poles by Orthodox Russians and Protestant Prussians. Later Germans contributed to the melding of Catholicism and Polish identity. And finally, I have suggested that in a divided nation, when there are division of religion, then the notion that religion is vital to national identity becomes weaker. But bear in mind that 44% of Hungarians still did say in 2021 that religion was an important component of national identity. So it's not like nobody believes that, but it's definitely, it's statistically less than what one finds about among the Poles. Pew Research Center is an excellent source for a lot of statistics. There's also a Polish research center which puts out a lot of information in English, as well as, of course, in Polish, with the latest survey data. And there are other places for surveys that all of you certainly know. I think that's pretty much it.